and we're here with a really special episode today for the Dreamer Comics podcast. I'm your host, Omar Spahi, and today I have my Thaniel co-creator, Terry Huddleston.
Yeah, how you guys doing?
Excited to have you on the show and talk comics.
Hey, I'm glad I got that co-creator credit, man. I'll fall for that. No, I'm joking.
No, man, we made it together. You had so much.
You were super easy breezy, man. It wasn't like no hassle whatsoever.
No, it's because we have great chemistry. You know, it's like we trust each other's style, and we were able to flow.
The trust was there, except for that. I think it was the bad guy for the other one. He ain't like it, but he was like gracious about it. He was just like, nah, man. I was like, hey, that didn't make it into the book. He was like, this was years later. Like, I didn't really like it too much. I went too cartoony, but hey, it's all good.
I love it, man. Mm-hmm. So I'm gonna start at the beginning, man. How did you get into comics?
All right, so I got into comics kind of weird, at least in my opinion. I grew up in a small town called Ben Harbor, Michigan, and we really didn't have a lot of exposure to a lot of stuff that people take for granted. Comic books being one of them, and my mom ended up moving to South Bend, Indiana, and a friend of mine had the first Ninja Turtles I've ever been exposed to. Before they came out big time, but it was the indie books that were collected into a graphic novel by Eastman and Laird, and that blew my mind. Like, I had never knew. It's hard to quantify, but it's like seeing a new medium. It's like somebody showed you a cartoon and you had never. It's like, what is these moving pictures? Oh my God. And so I had always wanted to make films, and comic books seemed to be like the easiest way at that point to tell the stories that are, locked in a young creative's head. I mean, it's all gobbledygook, it's just werewolves and people with guns and all that stuff. But at the time, I thought I was an auteur, and comic books was like the least path of least resistance anyway to make the stuff I wanted to make.
I love it, man. Yeah. And what point did you start doing art? So you were a fan of the comic book mediums after
right then and there. As soon as I started Turtles book, like I said, I wanted to make movies, but I was I sketched around here. I was just as terrible as any other kid. I think I was 11 years old.
Wow.
And but up until that point, I never had no like, oh, I'm gonna be an artist. It was just like I was like, oh man, this is what I want to do. I didn't know this was a thing you could do. And obviously, I started drawing my own Turtles comics, and I drew so many pages of it, and I was obsessed. And then eventually, I created my own character called the Cat, which is pretty much a cat version of the Ninja Turtles. And he was, I like westerns too, so he was like a gunslinging cat. I probably could sell that idea today if I polished it up. But
you saw Yojimbo made it into the TMNT cartoon.
Actually, that was definitely one of my like that. Obviously, you go from Turtles to Yojimbo to. Trying to think what else was out at the time. The Crow. It was a lot of black and white stuff, indie stuff that really influenced my style. Actually, which leads to Nathaniel. That's why Nathaniel was a perfect fit. Because it's like Nathaniel was pretty much like a solo Ninja Turtle, if you ask me.
Yeah.
Same kind of difference. Yeah. See,
I've never heard that.
Yeah. You never thought of that.
We've never even talked about it.
Never thought about that.
That's fun.
Yep.
And from that point, like, how did you decide? Okay, this is something I want to do professionally. So you grew up, you kept doing art. Mm-hmm. And at what point were you like, okay, this is going to be like a career for me? Well,
I had a false start at 21. This kind of dovetails into the low point where I went to my first Comic-Con. I think I was like, I was 21. And I showed, I think I might have been 20. I showed an artist my stuff, and I knew, I was like, hey, here he goes, man. This is my ticket in the big time. I'm nervous. I'm like, all right, they're going to sell how great I am, and I'm in. And of course, it didn't go that way. Obviously, he tore me down and tell me, everything. And he was nice about it. Like, he could have probably said it in the nicest way possible. My ego still was bruised to the core just because, you're a young, arrogant artist. And so I actually stopped drawing for like 5 years, and I didn't pick it back up again until, I think I was like 20, 25, 26. But I also couldn't draw in the same style. So that 19-year-old, 20-year-old me was still drawing in the Jim Lee, Rob Liefeld era comics. Mm-hmm. And then new school me was drawing in this kind of new image boom. So Ryan Otley and, all those image books that were coming out were my newer influence. So I was still reading comics. I just wasn't drawing. Like, I had kind of hung it up. I had got married at 21. And so I felt like, as a childish hobby, I got to put this away and become a man. I worked factory jobs, went to the military. I went on an odyssey, came right back into comic books, at 28 is when I decided to make a a real go of it. You know, I had been drawing again for 3 years and developed a more cartoony style that happened to be marketable. So, you know, I took it back to Comic-Con and tried it out, and it was, I think I made $670 something, which was just a little shy of what I made in a week at my job. So
Wow.
like that intoxicated me. Like, oh, okay, this is what I'm going to be doing. Now, if I can make this better, this is the low point, then I can build.
What was your first Comic-Con you went to?
It was Wizard World Chicago.
I think that was my first show too.
Yeah. This was many years ago, and it was back then. I mean, not to put them down if they're watching this, but it was humongous. It was like a big deal back then. They still had Marvel and DC industry guys showing up, and it was one of the only shows somebody from the Midwest that didn't get out to travel much could see the industry people at the show. And I was set up at a little 6-foot artist alley table, and I had a comic book called The What that I had created. Me and a buddy of mine, Alan Shell, he did the story, I did the artwork, and nobody was buying it. So I like pushed it aside and put out a little sign I drew and said, on the sign it says, I'll draw anything with custom art, I'll draw anything within reason. And because people ask you for crazy shit. So then after that, that's when, you know, people start like, oh, I want Captain America doing this. And I do got a funny story within reason. Before I put that, I had somebody ask me for Batman giving Robin a bath. That's what I know. I didn't know like how weird Comic-Con people could get. I was like, what? And they were like, no, just do it. Like they only did it because I put, I'll draw anything you want. So you had the one jackass guy. He paid for it though.
Yeah. And you're like,
I want Batman giving Robin a bath, and I drew it. You know, I made it funny. It was more of a comedy deal than it was. It was nothing showing or nothing. But anyway, that was my first Comic-Con right there. The good, the bad, and the ugly.
So you went through and all of a sudden you realized that selling those comic books that you created weren't as profitable to you as selling custom artwork.
No, not at all. And it was a year's stutter step between that and when I came back with Prince, maybe a year and some change later, same show, because it was within driving distance. Why I keep coming back to Chicago. I'm like 80 miles away, and that was the biggest show in my region, and next to a show that's slightly further away in Detroit. So I had come up with a series of prints. They were all busts, kind of like cut off at the waist. And I just did what I knew, Marvel, DC, and did all right. You know, made what I considered decent money at the time. But it wasn't until like 2011, which is when pretty much my life changed. But that also dovetails into like something you brought up before, as like when was I ready to give up? I was ready to give up in 2010. Like I had 3 kids. Actually, I just had another kid, so this is my 4th kid, and you know, my wife of 20-some years now, but. At that time, you know, the money was okay, but it's like, once again, maybe I got to be more responsible. And I had made a few bad financial moves business-wise with the comic book stuff where I lost money big time going the other way. Mm-hmm. And I was ready to hang it up. And it was winter or December. It's all dramatic, Shakespearean. And I had a client freelance me for about $8,000 worth of work from Australia. And that, like, kind of like, all right, okay, I can live to fight another day, but if I do this again next year, I'm going to revamp everything.
Yeah.
And that's where the headshots came along, the symmetrical look and all that. I like revamped everything, spent all winter redrawing all my artwork, and I had really got excited about the headshots. I loved them. I thought they were cool. So then in January, the first show came up, and then we hit like a benchmark, like financial success. We were like, holy crap! I didn't even believe any of that year. Like every year, each show, you know, we're jumping up from making what would be like $1,200. Now we're making, you know, I think I made like $4K at one show. Then it was up to $55K, and then $6K, $8K, $10K. You know, I'm like, whoa. And there's a correlation with that. It's not because I'm a great artist or I'm a genius, because the first Avengers came out. And so that's 2011 is exactly when the Comic-Con boom hit.
Yeah.
And I had the right product at the right time. Accidental. Like, who knew? Who would have bet on Avengers having a paradigm shift in the industry. I didn't, but
Yeah.
that's what helped me out.
I love it. Now, you're a marketing genius to me when it comes
I appreciate that.
When it comes to Comic Cons. A lot of people come over and they see the table, they bring the little bag and they set up and they just sit down and they wait for people to come to them. But you kind of have this way about you where you're so good at selling to people at Comic Con because you go and you're like me. You stand the entire time. You engage people. You talk to people about everything, and then on top of that, you have a million characters. With a giant wall that really kind of draws people attention. So like how did the wall and that idea to kind of like draw people's attention kind of come in?
That, believe it or not, that was there from the very beginning. Like, so some of my few influences was Tommy Castillo, who's not with us anymore. So, rest in peace, Tommy. And there was a guy named Rack who is still with us and still does Comic-Con. He sells little trading cards. And Tommy had a giant wall, but he was always guested at every show he was at, and he was always in the back in the corner. And back then, this is like primordial Comic-Con. It was all 8-foot setups. Everybody had little things, and then so it'd be these little. It's almost like think of like a burned out forest. Then there's one giant oak tree in the middle. That was like you could see Tommy stuff
from
across everybody because there was no skyline whatsoever. And I came in like Clubber Lang, man. I was hungry, like Rocky III. Had been viciously treated badly, had a lot of different types of careers, and so I came in with like a Killmonger type chip on my shoulder that, hey, I'm gonna take what's mine, and I'm gonna push the rules to the limit. And some rules I'm going to bend them and I'm going to break others because it was all cordiality. It was all people being cordial. But there was no rule that said you had to have an 8-foot setup.
Yeah.
It's just literally everybody else had an 8-foot setup, so people would assume I got to have one too. So I was one of the first guys that put that big giant wall in Artis Alley. So it literally would be 8-foot setups, giant tower. That's why I get the most flack for having a wall because I was one of the first guys to do it. But in my opinion, like everybody's got walls now.
Yeah.
Like everybody, and they got walls bigger than mine. Like I got the reputation for having the most giant setup, but it's not true anymore. But as Mark Twain said, you get a man a reputation for waking up at 6 a.m. He can wake up at 12 noon every day.
Yeah.
So I'm not complaining about it, but
no, but I think it's great that that's another way that people can kind of see your artwork, and you have such a style. When we first met, I remember being instantly drawn to your artwork. I think this was probably the first year or second year you had the headshots.
Right,
and
right.
I saw that same sign. It's I'll draw anything you want.
Yeah,
and
I don't even have that anymore.
And I was like, okay, that's cool. And I commissioned you to do some of the characters from the comic Xenoglyphs.
Right.
And we went through it, and I love the work. I remember you did Dom, Steven.
Right.
And you did such an awesome job with it. And I was like, oh, man, like, this guy's awesome. Like, I want to do some more work with him.
Yeah, secretly, though, Thaniel was more my wheelhouse because I love dark, gritty stuff. So when you threw that my way, I was like, yeah, I'm going hog wild on this.
It was funny because I was thinking of, like, I created Thaniel, and I was like, I want to do this, like, Japanese style, fusion thing. And I was like, who do I know who could, like, pull off Thaniel? And I was like, who would be a great artist for it? And I thought of you like right away. And I was like, Terry,
I appreciate that.
Terry would kill it. And then from there, I was like, hey, like I have this idea. It's a dark book. It's this kid. It's he lives in this like depressing world. He's the son of the Grim Reaper. And I think at that point you were like, I'm in. Let's go.
I'm in. Yeah, I'm in. I already I was already getting flashes at the time. Like, all right, he's gonna have a cool crossbone sigil that we still never made hoodies of that. We gotta do some merchandise on that. But yeah, that was still that's one of my funnest projects I've worked on, and definitely take pride. I was just showing it off today. Some guy was approaching me about some commission work, and I was like, let me pull up that thing. That thing you issue 4. I'm like, yeah, here you go, check this out. Scroll through this.
I love it. And one thing you're particularly great about is character design. I
appreciate that, man.
I had this idea of this, like, because Thaniel was this kid in a hoodie, and I was like, oh, it's going to be like this young Death and this old Death.
Right.
And so, like, I was thinking, the traditional Grim Reaper look is, he's in a hoodie, and he has the cloak on, and he has, and you kind of ran with it, and you gave him this, like, Bayou kind of vibe.
Oh, yeah. Classic Death, man. Like I said, I always liked pretty much the devil you see in like jazz type Southern Gothic stories where he's like, hey, how's it going there? What do you need? And so I was like, I want to go for that vibe instead of the classic, big horn Satan type character. And so, I mean, I'm not saying it's a newly foreign character, but I don't know if you ever seen the movie Crossroads. That was like probably one of my bigger. It's not the Britney Spears one for anybody watching this, but there's an older one with young Ralph Macchio, and he's got to play guitar against the devil, devil's minion. The devil and the devil's minions. This really great guitarist named Steve Vai, and they're like dueling back and forth. And a little bit of film trivia. Steve Vai did both guitars for himself and for Ralph Macchio because Ralph Macchio could not play that good. But it's a great movie if you haven't seen it. But the devil in that's really cool. So that's literally like one of my major influences because he had this awesome smile where he could show all his teeth when he smiled. He just looks so evil, Guy smiling, but he looks like, oh yeah, that guy's gonna. Screw you over with the deal he makes with you. It takes your soul. So.
And it's cool. You put in a lot of stuff. When I saw it, I was like, "Ooh, is that gonna work?" And I thought about it for a second. I was like, "No, that's even cooler than what I thought of." Because you made him barefoot. He had the top hat. He kind of had this like mystique about him, where you were like, "Ooh, this is kind of like."
Well, yeah, I wanted to subvert every cliche. Like, oh, let's give him boots with spikes. Or like you can paint the cliche. I was like, nah, I want to make him more like earthy. Like he's more. Like I said, like jazz, like with the barefoot, I definitely wanted to show his connection more to the planet. You know, it's a subtle symbol of like, hey, this guy is connected.
He's one with
to earthly matters more so than somebody that's fully armored and
and protected from all that.
Protected from all that, not this guy. I actually had a lot of, not that I got a foot fetish, but if you know, I had a lot of panels with his feet touching things. And when he would land on stuff, it was like but you already knew who it was. Based off his toes. But anyway, what can you do?
I love it, man. And that was such a fun project to work on with you. Another thing I'm a huge fan of yours is your new series of characters that you kind of came up with that is this whole new look and feel, and there are definitely some minority characters in there.
Right. And once again, I mean, obviously, actually, you're partially to thank for that because Daniel definitely got the wheels going on taking archetypes and making different types of characters with them. So like the death character could easily be one of my characters in the new series I'm doing. The same type of aesthetic. Because another big thing I'm big on is fashion too. Mm-hmm. So there's got to be something that's fashionable and practical. Like, man, could this actually be made? Not like something that's so crazy that it'd take a cosplayer like a million years to make. So that's another thing I wanted for Daniel and for the characters I'm working on now with my new series is that I want them to be cosplayable, if that's even a word. But
that's definitely a word.
Yeah,
cosplayable is definitely a thing. It's something to
able
consider.
to be cosplayed. Probably is a more proper way to say that. But yeah, I wanted characters that, and that's like my greatest thrill is to see people walking around as something that I created, and I've managed to see that 3 times now.
That's cool.
Yeah, with more people saying like, "Hey, I'm gonna," and they just do it on their own. I don't push them. I don't have to pay them. They just like, "Hey, I'm inspired. I'm gonna go get all my own material, cut it up, sew it up, and come to Comic-Con dressed as a character you created because it inspired me." And that's what you want as an artist, right?
Absolutely.
Any type of creator. That's like the end result.
It's this huge like moment of honor when you get like someone dressing up as your character or someone coming up to you and saying, "Your book changed my life."
Yeah, for sure.
It's always crazy when people come up to your book and like you're like, "Oh, can you sign this for me?"
Yeah, I was getting all kind of random Daniel fans, man. Like I had already kind of moved out of my brain. I don't like, oh man, I just read it. Like, oh, could you sign these? These are so cool. And I'm like, oh yeah, I did do that, didn't I?
Because you did a great job with it.
And I give you all the credit, man. I tell people all the time.
You all the credit. So
that plot twist was great, man.
Yeah,
it was a good plot twist. So not to spoil anything.
I love it, man. And if people haven't checked it out, it's available now on Amazon, and they can go pick it up.
Right. It seems like a love fest. Like, they're just gonna talk about their cool book. It's good though. So what can I say?
I'm gonna take you back for a second and go back to the Comic-Con world.
All right.
I know it's your bread and butter. How many shows? I mean, at your heyday, how many shows were you doing a year? Like, were you doing 52 shows?
No.
Because it felt like it at a certain point.
It did feel like it. I think I average somewhere probably around 30 shows a year. Okay. Maybe. I don't want to say 40. I know I don't do 40 because I
feel like you've done 40 before.
I probably have, but recently I pared it down because there is a point where, as a creator, you gotta create, and so. But if you take out all the frou-frou language that we use in the art world, like you're a human factory, and so you got to be home to produce new product, new merchandise. So I don't care if you're selling buttons or if you're selling artwork. And so that home times end up becoming just as valuable as going to a show. Because if you can, we talked about me reformatting my art, which I'm in the process of doing again. Like, you gotta take time to basically, you know what, I'm gonna be losing a little bit of money by not doing shows, but when I come back, my profit margins are gonna skyrocket because I got new, fresh product, and it's dazzling people, and it's got all the new gimmicks and all the new printing techniques are being used on it. And so, just like new cars, they don't push the same 1989 Buick Century. They gotta, like, all right, we're gonna
make a new version of it.
Stop production on this, make a new version, roll it out, market it, campaign it, and once it runs its course in a couple of years, we're gonna roll out a new one. So I'm the same way with artwork.
It's really interesting because you have these characters who are iconic characters, and they'll go through and you'll see like a version of them, and then you'll be able to go, okay, like, cool, that's a cool version, and then you go and revamp them and kind of bring it another level.
Right.
So you do sell a lot of prints.
Right.
Whenever you're kind of coming up with a new idea for a print or a new character, like, where do you pull from? Because I know you like to go where the kids are popular, like what's popular with kids. I know you're a big fan of so much.
Right.
You love to draw what you love.
Right. Exactly.
But what like kind of stands out when they're like, okay, cool, like there's this Five Nights at Freddy thing. Like,
right. Well,
there's this.
There's something to be said about drawing stuff that, like, initially you might not be familiar with. Like me, I also like to learn. I got a lot of other traits that bleed into this to make a perfect storm. Like, I love learning about new stuff. So when I haven't heard about something, that makes me more curious than like, I don't know anything about that, I'm not gonna look into it. So I got nothing but time to listen and learn new information as I'm drawing whatever I'm drawing. So that's, once again, another synergy that goes in my direction, because as I'm working on any given thing, I can pop on a YouTube video that explains all about the other thing that I want to learn about. And so I'm like, oh, that's pretty cool. I think I want to draw this character, watch, a few seasons, and, get a new fandom. Yeah. It's like everybody wins.
And then that way you can go through and you can know that character.
Yep.
And then
have a conversation about it. And
not,
it. Be a hack that, I don't watch this crap. Yeah. I just want to sell it to you, But
if you're a fan of everything you do, then all of a sudden you're like, oh, cool. Like, you remember in that episode you do that.
Yep,
and
exactly.
it kind of gets that connection with a fan.
Exactly.
And I think that's what a lot of people are really interested in, is like, oh, cool. Like, yeah, we talked to the artist about it. He was the only one that had that particular version of this character.
Actually, I get most of the time, I'm the only one that'll even talk to him. Period. Like, man, nobody will talk to us about, like, there's like, yeah, thank you, but then there's like hey, sometimes for me, just making that connection to having a real conversation about what they're into. And I'll get parents all the time, they'll circle back around, or they'll shoot an email like, man, you're the only one that talked to my kid. They're on the spectrum and they have a hard time opening up, and you got them to open up and talk about stuff that they won't even talk to me about because, they feel too shy about it. Yeah. And I'm like joking and like, oh man, I hate that guy. And I wish that character would die. And it's a public service as well. I feel like we're like the Comic-Con ambassadors. I know it's a pretentious thing to say, but it's true.
No, you are.
I've had experiences. We all have when we met our heroes and they let you down and they say something crazy and you're devastated. They don't care. Yeah. They moved on with their life, but you're like, man, I was building up to this moment and now it's like a stain on my life.
Yeah.
That you gave me such a bad first impression when it could have easily went the other way.
Yeah.
And so I'm very cognizant of not crushing anybody. Like, when people show me their artwork, I make sure to find something positive. So even if it's terrible, because I was terrible. Like, it's not a matter of like, I don't look at artwork as a gift, by the way. I look at it as something, a skill. Like, there's nobody that has the gift of plumbing or the gift of being an electrician. That's
a gift right there.
Yeah, it's not a gift. Like, no, you went to school to learn how to do plumbing, or you just did, street plumbing for a long time and you figured out how to do it. But same thing with art. It's just a matter of, same thing with people doing editing. You got the gift of editing. Like, no, I just use the programs a lot. So I know how to use Adobe Premiere and all these programs. And so I think when you demystify art, even to yourself, it's easier to appreciate where people are, no matter where they are, especially if they're young. Older people are maybe a little bit less forgiving. Like if you're 46 and you're drawing like a 6-year-old, then it's probably not gonna happen, right?
Yeah.
But if you're 6 drawing like a 6-year-old, like, hey, you know what, kid? I think I see you got a propensity for technology and all that stuff. Yeah, definitely keep going and read these books and study this stuff.
Check out this thing, this drawing, this tablet, this drawing software, and then you can kind of like.
I'm all about the software. Like I've probably gotten more kids. iPad should put me on the payroll. I've probably gotten more parents to get their kids iPad Pros than their marketing probably has, because they're like, oh, I'm going to get a Surface. It's like, I don't get a Surface, get an iPad Pro, because it's all in one. You don't have to worry about any other peripherals, and it's great. Because I got my daughter one, and who's also an artist, and she like took off with it, man. Like her art skills. I'm like a proud papa. Like, yeah.
The next generation of artists.
Next generation, yeah. Got to keep it going.
I love it.
She's her, my girls. I got 2 boys, 2 girls. But my girls seem to be the only one that want to do artwork, and my boys want to build stuff. So I can't get them to, like, but they don't have the patience to do art. Like they want like instant gratification, hands-on, So one's like a Lego guy, and one's like a pipe cleaner statue type guy, which they're pretty good in their own right. So
I love it, man.
Yeah. My youngest son actually makes movies too, so I'm happy about that.
He's still trying to follow in your footsteps because you wanted to be in the movies.
It is. I'm actually trying to get him to diversify. I got so many kids. It's like, all right, I need a computer programmer, an artist. I'm gonna need this and that.
You got a whole team, man.
You guys learn all these different skills, and that way I never have to hire outside the family.
I love it, man.
Yep. So.
That's cool. And I think you've been a great inspiration to them.
I try to be, man. I try to be.
I mean, the fact that, I see them kind of looking up to you, doing artwork, and trying to, one thing that I can imagine is tough is just going away to all these different cons every weekend.
It actually helps. I think the best thing that ever happened to me growing up was my mom. She was single parent, and she would have to go off to work, but I love that alone time, man. And then, it gives you time to miss your parents, Same thing with your spouse. Like I travel, sometimes we both go to shows together, sometimes she's at home, sometimes we go to different shows, but it's something about that cycle that I feel like is very primitive to man, to go out, hunt for something, bring it back, skin it, distribute the goods, and then take the tools you got from that last hunt to go hunt even bigger game.
Yeah.
And so I feel like it's something primitively right, like in a primitive sense, to go away from your home to find your source of income, as opposed to like, oh, I work right around here, and it's like you come back like, what'd you catch? That's how entrepreneurship is. If you gear up, like those cheesy Batman montages, you put all your gear on, you strap on everything, and you're like, what'd you catch? All right, here's what we got. All right, here's what we can do with this. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take this to do that. And so the feedback loop is just so gratifying. Even after 10 years, it's just like I don't see any signs of stopping. As a matter of fact, as you know, you can experiment with it. You're like, what, I'm going to change it up. Because you're your own boss. Yeah. You're like, what, I'm going to see if this will work combined with this, or maybe I'm going to try a whole new thing this year.
A/B testing. You try 2 different things. You try one with one person, see if it works. Try one with another person. If it has good success, you try this one again. See if you go back to it. You kind of play with it and see what works. Right. And you can do different sales techniques, different things.
Exactly. Exactly. It's the perfect petri dish to try out any new thing you want. That's what I love about the Comic-Con industry. It's so pure, and it's so unregulated in certain areas that you can really try wild things. But they sell you. In my case, I buy a 10 by 20. They don't tell you like what you can do with it. Yeah. They just go, hey, here's your empty concrete block of space. And it's up to you to try really cool and creative things in it, which once again leads to the wall. But as you can see, nowadays I'm using the whole floor too.
Yeah.
So
you
like
put your posters across the floor.
Yeah, every square I walk on them, people are like, "Oh my God, you're walking on your art," But it's another thing that attracts. They're looking like, "Man, that guy over there walking on his artwork. Let's go see what that's about." So,
So I got another question for you. When you go and you're gearing up for these shows, you do so many of them a year. What do you decide as far as what to bring with you? As far as like prints, like how many do you know? Do you know how to bring? Right. 20. How do you know to not produce too many? How do you know not to produce too few? So you're not losing out on these people who are like, hey, I like this obscure character from this manga. Right. Like how do you know?
Well, in the past, I laughed because I just got a handle on that after 9 years of doing this. I'm in my 10th year now, so I started keeping metrics of everything I sell. And then I got those metrics broken down to demographics, so I know what the stronger demographics are and the weaker ones are. And depending on how you read the data, you can read it like, okay, I need to bring less of this and more of this. Or you can, as a creator, though, you can like, I need to do more powerful art in this demographic, and this demographic's doing fine for now. I need to bump up this demographic. So at least what we were talking about off camera about how, my Marvel and DC had took a nosedive, but now, I know, okay, if I do better art, so it's a two-pronged thing, it'll sell more. So the numbers that I show from the sales, so okay, I need to bring X amount on average of this thing per show. So it's very boring, but it's pretty much just metrics.
No, it's
you
not
just
boring
keep
at all.
metrics.
It's really interesting because a lot of people. I did Comic Cons for many years, and I would set up and go through and try to sell my own books and be at the edge of my table talking, flagging people down. Hey, how you doing? Check out a new book.
Oh man, you were a hustler, man.
And it's just about getting people's attention,
Right.
and tell them the concept and
Right.
see if they're interested or not. It's just you're going and you're doing a hard sell.
Right.
And it's something that's really uncomfortable.
At first,
yeah. It's like you feel like sometimes people are like you're bothering people, but you have to, all of a sudden it's crazy because you have these people who are like walking by and you're like, hey, how you doing? And they like stop for a second. They're like, oh, talking to me. Okay, what's going on? They go and you start a conversation and you give them something and they come back to, like, I've had people come back the next day and be like, that comic book that you had that I had never heard of before, it changed my life. It was incredible. I can't wait to pick up the next one.
Right? And
you're like, oh, wow, what a feeling. Like, that's what I love about doing the Comic Cons.
Right.
Is you get that interaction with fans and you get a chance to experience new things. You get a chance to help people experience new things.
That's true. And a lot of people, since Comic Con is still, I look at the 2011 was like the big bang of the comic industry, but the universe is still expanding. It hasn't yet cooled down and congealed into planets yet. So we're still in the explosion, even way back then. And then we get the secondary explosion of the Infinity War movie, which is just like I've always been pretty good at predicting paradigm shifts, at least not necessarily predicting them, but at least knowing when they're happening. Mm-hmm. And that's a paradigm shift. Like that movie should have tanked. We're a cynical nation now where we want colossal failures to happen. And Marvel, you think I work for them as much as I praise them, but just from a business practice, they built to something that took 10 years, a domino situation that took 10 years to set up, and then they knock it all down, and it just lays out perfectly.
Yep.
Like, because you got to think, right before that, Black Panther came out, made $1 billion.
Yeah.
Did another one, like, just back to back.
Yeah.
Just boom, boom, boom. They're just bombarding the industry with new things that they've never seen before.
You talk about, like, hitting your demographics. Like,
Yep.
Black Panther is, like, the first major superhero movie with a black character.
Yeah, but not only that, it's with a black character that hit Harry Potter levels of popularity. Like, everybody wants in on that. That's what I'm proud of. It's not like it's black for blacks. It's like, oh man, I want to be a Wakandan. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm not even African American or of color.
Yeah.
Every time I see a person that not of color dressed as Black Panther, I'm like, yeah, that's awesome. Because I know that they're into the mythos. Just like you see people dressed up as Jedis, you people dressed up as Harry Potter. Everybody wants in on the escapism and the fantasy. And so the fact that they was able to establish, not just a flash in the pants, it's never going away. Like, we're going to be 20 years from now, Black Wakanda Con. Trust me. Like, it's Black, I call it Black Star Wars.
Yeah.
Like, it has so much rich mythology built right in from the beginning. Like, you would watch a Dora Milaje movie. You'd watch a movie about any one of those characters. If they did a Killmonger movie where he's just running around murking people before this movie, you'd watch that movie.
Yeah.
And so it was like, man, and I will be the first one to tell you, I was not super confident that the movie was going to do what it did. I thought it'd be competent, but I didn't know it would just like, oh, wow.
Shattered records.
It shattered everything. When I saw it, I realized, okay, like, oh yeah, this is going to be huge. Because this is like watching a sci-fi movie or something like that. I thought it was going to be another superhero movie. But it felt actually, strangely enough, and I like Last Jedi, but it felt more like Star Wars than Star Wars did that year. You know what I mean? Like, this feels more like Star Wars. Yeah, where the guy wants his, claim, like Hamlet. It felt more like Shakespeare, I guess, than Star Wars did.
And that's a testament to the character and the team behind it, because they did a great job.
And it's definitely all about the team. And I think good companies pick good teams, and I think a lot of filmmakers and creators are starting to realize that we just can't put it all like, oh, this director or this guy. Like, no, you need to get this choreographer, this cinematographer, and this, and put them all together, make a Justice League, pun intended, of creatives that make a project that's greater than the sum of its parts.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know.
So I'm gonna take it back to Comic Cons for a second. So for people who have never done Comic Cons before, like, either as a fan or setting up or tabling for the first time, what advice can you give to somebody who's new to it and is like, okay, I'm comfortable in my art now. I've been working on it. I want to go out there and set up my first show. What advice would you give to somebody who's trying to set up for the first time?
If you're a newcomer, like you have it easiest of all. Your brain may be telling you that you're scared, but you literally got nothing to lose, because you can do anything, try anything, be anything you want to be. It's almost like you got a tyranny of choice. You have so much choice on how you want to do this, that could be paralyzing. But but you can come in and basically experiment to a wider degree with what your brand's going to be, how you're going to market yourself, and so. The only energy you have is you basically spend money to get a booth and then show up. And it sounds simple, but like showing up with the proper marketing and proper branding, that's going to take time. It's like it's hard to nail right off the bat unless you come from sales, which luckily I come from sales, so I knew I had to come with something. But two,
and even then, it still took you a while to get the headshot.
It still takes you a while, yeah, because you're working inside of a ecosystem is the word I'm looking for. That's very small, but at the same time, the insular nature of Comic-Con is easy for a person that's able to see what's not. Like, you know what? There's no artwork that is, let's say, specifically aimed at heavy-set women. Yeah. Right? Like, somebody can come in tomorrow and make a killing doing that. I'm personally doing it because I'm seeing, like, man, there's so many things that are not there. That all you gotta, that's what I'm saying. If I could start over again, it's like, I could probably start like 5 different types of booths. If I was if I could time myself times 5 and just like, hey, I'm doing all biker art. Yeah. I'm doing all vehicle art. I'm doing all this. So there's so many different things that are left in them, because once again, the explosion of Comic-Con is yet to congeal. So there's still so much ground that could be taken up, because a lot of people also. There's people that are innovators, and then there's people that are imitators. Yeah. And I'm not knocking it, because I've always said you got to imitate before you can innovate. But since large swaths of people just follow in the footsteps of other people, they leave gaps, and they're not willing to take risks once they've done it for a while. Like, you know what? I see anime sells, I better sell anime. I see this sells, I better sell that. So a new person that doesn't have the fear, they actually don't even know they're accidentally innovating. They're like, you know what? I don't know anything. I just want to bring in superheroes with bow ties. That's what I like. That's what I'm going to bring in. And that's a cool idea. All of a sudden, it's like exploded. Like, holy shit. Then the guy, there's like, this guy with the bow tie art, and I'm doing all this. And it's like, well, you got to stay fresh. Yeah. So I love it. So new people, I would say, come in. Don't be afraid to bring in what you would be considered a stupid idea. It just may be the next big thing. Big thing. Yep.
You can see everyone at the convention holding it and going out there.
And I've seen people too, so on a secondary note, come in after I've come in. It's not a time thing. They had a more innovative idea. Next thing you know, they're working for Marvel and DC like a year later. And their idea, Anthony Lucia is a perfect example. He came in. We started off at the same time, but he got picked up by DC to do the DC Bombshell series. Now it's a household name if you're in the comic book industry. So I was like, and I was so proud that he got hooked up like that, man. I was like, man, way to go. Yeah. It was very awesome.
So let's go into okay, it's your first time at Comic-Con. How do you know what to do, what to bring? Like, who do you contact when you're trying to set up at a show?
Usually, the websites have an exhibitor section that you can. Sometimes it's easy to find, sometimes it's not. Sometimes you got to click through a few menus to get the exhibitor application section. Because you got to keep in mind, at the base core, the promoters of the show want to make money too. Yeah. And so they want to sell tickets to attendees, and they want to sell booth space. Yep. So depending on what time of year you're looking to book space, you might have a little bit of leverage, but the longer you wait, the more the space fills up and you don't have any leverage. So you want to, the first year is rough because most of the time, whenever you're getting started, you're already 6 months behind the game, no matter when you're in, just because there's shows going on all year. So any show that's coming up for the following month, then you might as well hang that up. It's probably not going to be happening, but because they sell out quick. But if you're on the sites and you're like, you know what, I want to plan out 6 months in advance, start buying booth space. You know, you could do that. And one thing I will say for as far as what to bring and what to sell, that's something you'll have to find out, you know, by doing. But initially, the main thing you want to do is book a whole bunch of shows in advance. You want to have them locked in. It's like, I call them locked in paychecks. You know, hey, I'm going to get money on this day, and this day. Then you want to draw your ass off. You want to draw, and draw so much that you feel insane. And then you'll start to have enough of a spread to see what sticks. Like, you know what, my men riding ponies section sold well, and whereas my other stuff didn't sell so well at all. And I took it to these 3 shows, so I got a good, you know, 3-show metric to kind of compare and contrast. All right, I'm going to do less of this or just cut this out altogether, do more of this. And then, you know, and also while you're doing something that works, you want to be trying something else. Once again, always be experimenting as well. I tell people all the time, too, that you always want to be evolving because once the paradigm shift changes again, you're already too late. Like, you can't just change on a dime. So if you're constantly trending in a bunch of different areas, it's easy to kind of go in a certain lane than it is to try to go from a singular thing to all of a sudden you're trying to do 9 different things. So the short and simple is if you always want to be doing a lot of different things all the time. You know, whether it's a small measure or in large measure, you want to
be doing it.
Always it's just like stocks. You want to have diversified stocks. You want to have diversified products.
All right, now I'm gonna run down a situation with you that I know has happened to you because it's happened to me.
All right.
I remember it was, you know, I was talking to some guy at the bar, and he was like, hey, I'm putting on a Comic-Con. It's going to be huge. We're going to have this creator, and we're going to do this. And lo and behold, we get there, those creators are there, and there's maybe, you know, 50 booths set up, but not a single person walks in the door.
Right.
How do you know what shows to go to? How do you justify the transportation costs? Like, what's the process and, like, figuring out, like, what to expect from that show?
Now, I will say I do have a supplemental income of doing freelance work that helps out. But, and it's harder to quantify my instinct of knowing, like, I got a bad feeling about that. Because sometimes I'll go to the website's jank, I'm like, but at the same time, I've seen shows, some of my best shows to date, even now, have really horrible websites. So that's not a hardcore metric. It's just all about gut. A lot of us rely on word of mouth. We're like gossiping old ladies when it comes to like, oh, how was the show? How'd you do? What'd you do? Was the crowd good? And we're pumping each other for information, a lot like stockbrokers would. Yeah. You know, I call it insider stock trading, but it's legal. Yeah. when you can get a tip like, oh, I heard they're gonna have Chris Pines at that show. Oh, really? Okay, I'm gonna have some of that ready. So, it's
important to build your tribe, you know, and have those people who you go to shows with, you meet at shows,
right?
And you have those people you have like confidants who can tell you and be honest with you.
Right.
Okay, this show was good. I did that show last year. Don't go. I did that.
Right.
Yeah, you have to go to this show next year,
right,
because it helps you kind of build your brand and you know,
right,
especially breaking into comics. You want to try to be at as many shows as possible, but you don't want to over leverage yourself and then like end up in a bad place.
Right. I mean, it's gonna happen. Like, you know, you're gonna have a stinker show. I feel like in the beginning of any business, if I was running any business that I had to do that was set up, that was structured like ours, I'd say do as many shows as possible. Go nuts. And then work backward, like whittle it down backwards. Like, there's no need to try to be safe at first. Like, because if you do that, you're basically gonna like blindside yourself from all the missed opportunities you don't know you missed.
Yeah, you gotta take some risks.
You gotta take some risks, right? Yeah. So if you're like, oh, I'm gonna play it safe and do 2 shows a year, like, well, damn, you don't like you might have had 3 bad shows, but you missed out on 20 other good shows that would have changed your. Now, there's like having a good show, but then there's once you get the nice network of shows going, it can change your whole income level. I know for me, we went up, at least 3 or 4 income levels from where we were. I mean, we started off dirt poor, but but if I was too risk averse in the beginning, it would have never happened because I wouldn't be out there to have opportunities where, let's say, I met an Omar because I wasn't at that show, and so, and not to get all metaphysics, but it's how it works. It's like you might even have a terrible show, but at that terrible show, it was so bad that the editor of blah, blah, blah talked to you for an hour because there was nothing else to do. So now you got a gig with blah, blah, blah because of, so like it all synergizes together somehow, So there's really, not to sound too pie in the sky, there's really no such thing as a wasted show. Yeah. Now, I can tell you my quantifiably like worst financial shows, but at the same time, that same promoter is like, yeah, we know that was a dog show. We're going to put you in a better spot at this show, which once again equals more money. So, if I could go back and edit, all the bad shows, I don't think I would because they led to greater opportunities. So
that's something that's really important. You got to learn from your mistakes.
Yep, you definitely.
And so now we're gonna go talk a little bit about Daniel because I wanted to talk about one of your amazing talents. It's like you had this amazing ability to direct the shots. You had the finding the camera angles, you finding what the scene was about, and really kind of getting that point across. Mm-hmm. And how did you kind of have those inclinations? Like, what do you?
Well, like I said before earlier, when it comes to my introduction to comics, I'm a film guy first, and the comics was like a secondary. Now my generation had like YouTube, I probably wouldn't even be in comics, but we had those, either a Super 8 camera or those big giant ones with the VHS tape in it. And that was not something that, everybody had access to. And even then, I mean, I don't even know what you would edit on back then. So, home movies were out of the question. I used to do little recordings and all that, but even that can only take you so far. So, my love for cinematic storytelling, which is a lot different than comic books. Like cinematic storytelling is more subdued. There's not a lot of forced angles and characters coming at the camera. It's more pan back, long shots, medium shots. But for the type of story you were telling, it was a perfect, fit of like, hey, we're not telling an action story. We're telling more of a drama thriller than we are, look at Daniel, the superhero. Like, especially with, like, once again, not giving away the twist, but with the plot turn, it was like, oh yeah, this is definitely a lot deeper than you would expect from like anything, Captain Underpants or something like that.
No, I wanted to do something that was real to me. Like for me with Daniel, I experienced a lot of death in my life. I lost my mom. Right. I lost my grandma recently at that point. And all 4 of my grandparents had passed away. Mm-hmm. And I kind of felt like I was surrounded by death, and I felt responsible, like in a weird way. I felt like I was to blame. I felt like I could have done more. There was something I could have done. Right. And this to me was like kind of my love letter to them of how I was feeling, how I tried to embody that for myself. Right. And I'm really proud of the work we did on that together, man.
Yeah. And, I'm proud of the work, but I've always said, I feel like an old grandpa, but me and my wife said, we're proud of you. Like you took it for a kid your age, man, you especially at the time, you were real young. I was like, man, this guy's like 50 years old. Like, he got an old soul. So, you were always doing things that 20-year-old me wasn't doing. I was still, playing video games and saving the princess from another castle. By that time, you were trying to build some comic book empire. So I was a little bit jealous and embarrassed by your ambition. I'm joking. I was proud of it. But
thanks, man. No, you're doing it too, man.
Yeah, you took it and you took what you're supposed to do with pain and trauma, in my opinion, and mechanized it to a life. Like I always tell my wife, she just recently lost her father. And my mom just actually had a massive stroke, and that really got me shooken up too. But I think the best thing you can do is live your life to the fullest. And I don't mean pleasure seeking. I mean like be as successful and thrive as much as you possibly can to honor your family name.
Exactly.
And I know that sounds very like primitive, but I'm all about that. Like when people say Huddleston, I want them to think awesome things,
Yeah.
not like, oh, well, Terry, you sure can drink.
No, yeah,
You know what I mean?
exactly. You're like,
I don't want that to be my reputation. Like, man,
No.
Terry Huddleston busts his ass. He works hard, and I'm gonna assume
Yeah.
until I'm let down that his kids do the same thing.
Yeah.
You know, that anybody with the Huddleston last name that comes into the comic book industry has the same ethics.
Yeah.
As that same thing with Spahi, you
Yeah.
know, when you do have that little tyke, you want him to come in like, hey man, you know, your father, you know,
yeah, exactly.
he
He's
did
a grinder.
He did a lot of great things, and that's what he's gonna hear from me anyway. You know,
Yeah,
I don't know what your cousins are gonna tell him.
And a lot of people in comics don't come from a lot of people don't come from nothing. You know, a lot of people have
Right.
connections, and you
Right.
came and you were like, okay, I'm gonna make it on my own. I'm gonna do it, and that's what you did.
You know, that became I realized that was my biggest advantage, is that I didn't care about the hierarchy of comics, because that wasn't like they had done nothing for me. Like they weren't the guys that were there for me when, you know, I was down and out. So I felt like I owed no allegiance to them. And so like I said before, I came in with a Killmonger chip on my shoulder, like, hey man, I'm gonna take what I want out of this comic book industry, because not only is it like you guys are terrible at business, and I'm not calling on anybody in particular, but just people were just more like flea market people. Like they weren't like, this is a business. Like, don't you guys realize this is a fucking $1 million business? Like, and now it's a $1 billion business, right? And we're
Yeah.
still like, oh, here's my, like, guys, no, this is like Manafort. This is a gold mine that
Yeah.
we're sitting on. And if you happen to be alive at this time, and you got the cross section, when you got the skills that we got, like this is what we've been waiting for. This is a paradigm shift of the cliche starving artists to starving artists no more. Like, you don't have to starve anymore if
Yeah.
you know how to take this skill we got that used to be useless and make it useful.
Absolutely. It's
Yeah.
the way the world has changed.
It's
because
changed. Like,
because-
you say writer, like whatever. Now, like, man,
people are
writers.
like, oh, what do you write?
like,
Oh, you write
what?
yeah, movies, TV.
You got a
comic
book? I'll
books,
buy it.
Yeah.
So it's crazy how creatives
Yeah.
have become the new rock stars in this new economy, because everything we live in a consumer, like they're with YouTube and the movies and television. There's such a glut of consumption of entertainment that they don't have people, because people think that any type of entertainment is something that it's a gift or whatever, like we said before, but it's all skills based. Like, you got to learn how to sing, you got to learn how to, you know, act, you got to learn how to write, you got to learn how to draw. And so if you have less and less people learning these skills because they're too busy consuming it, it makes a paradigm shift where the 300 of us that are actually professionals at it
And focus
actually
on
get
it,
the
yeah.
benefit, and focus on it, get the benefit from it.
Absolutely.
So, you know, I'm always stressing that to any creative, like, quit beating yourself up. Like, all you gotta do
process.
is get on the scene.
Yeah.
Like, it's like the jazz renaissance
Yeah.
right now. Just play a saxophone, you'll be in somebody's band tomorrow. You
I
know?
love it.
So
I have one final question for you. It's something you may know, but what advice would you have to anyone who, you know, wants to be the next Terry Huddleston, wants to start, you know, go out there doing their art, make it as an artist?
Well, I mean, look, you don't have to be a Terry Huddleston. You can be whoever you are out there. But I will say, as far as me, man, I think my greatest asset is that I don't really have a fear of public speaking. I think boldly, definitely be bold. There's no reason to be timid about your marketing campaign. Like, if you're like, man, it'd be cool if I had a big giant sign with my art saying buy my art here or whatever, you could do that. Even if you're doing your own characters, you know, it's just, there's no reason to be reserved. Like, this is a cutthroat industry. And I would say, strangely enough, look to the big companies. Look what they do. Every major company in Comic-Con has a sign bigger than God. And they want everybody to know, this is Marvel, this is Sideshow Collectibles,
this is Image,
this is Image.
Boom
And you
Studios.
can't miss, you can't even look around
Yeah.
it. And it is so audacious. But to me, I look at it the other way. I'm like, oh my God, I can't wait to get signs like that one day for my own characters, where people can't miss them. So they're just marketing all day, just beaming out, you know, whatever I want. So basically, like I said, if you're trying to do this, man, you probably can hear my voice. Just get in there like it's a gladiator pit and have fun. It's a fun struggle. The most fun struggle you're gonna have being self-employed is working in the Comic-Con industry. because it's a colorful industry. It's always changing. The rules never stay the same.
And you gotta love what you do.
You gotta love what you do, and you will love it. Like you'll look up. I started off. I had maybe 1 or 2 gray hairs. Now it's many years later, and I forgot I'm getting like I look at them like I'm getting old. But
There's a lot of wisdom in there.
Yeah, there you go.
There's gonna be more. We're gonna get there together.
I'll get the all white Morgan Freeman hair pretty soon, but yeah, for sure.
Thank you so much for coming on the show and talking comics and,
no problem, man.
And having fun.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.